Eastern philosophers and religions have been brainwashing the West for a few decades now and telling us that attachment is the root of all suffering. Is it really? What is attachment? What is detachment? Is it truly preferable to be detached? Or is it just a disassociation, a way of no longer experiencing the vitality of life itself? My name is Matthew Zoltan. Today I'm going to go into this topic probably a lot more deeply than you've heard it go before, and that is starting with the question of what is attachment. So you think about it. When you feel attached, you say you feel attached. Yeah? Do you think attached or do you feel attached? So attachment, I would suggest, is a feeling, a natural sensation of the body. And it is a way in which we hold all the information of our current environment and circumstances, the people in our life, how we, in a sense, hold our understanding and our felt sense of the people in our life and the situations we're in. Our connection with our life is, in fact, our attachment to it. And that attachment to it is a physical sensation. It's a part of our physiology. All animals have this. It's very important for our survival. Without that attachment, we don't actually know the presence and the condition and the needs of either ourselves or of others in our life. And we don't actually understand our environment, because that attachment is in fact the accumulation of what's coming at us all the time, the felt sense of knowing before any thinking or interpretation of that felt sense comes into mental form. And so with attachment, we find ourselves caring, we find ourselves concerned, we find ourselves vulnerable, we find ourselves affected. And being affected is, I think, one of the main reasons that the philosophies from the East have suggested that attachment is the cause of all suffering, or the primary cause of suffering, or variations on that. Because when we're attached and we're affected, being affected by others means that we become perhaps disturbed or thrown around a little bit within ourselves. And philosophers and religious people are quite frightened of this for some reason. They're frightened of becoming attached to someone in case they lose that someone. So rather than fully letting themselves be completely involved with the attachments of relationships that they have in their lives, they prefer to hold something back. And this is particularly in the Eastern philosophical mentality, to remain a little aloof, a little cool, a little disassociated and disconnected. But how do you do this, in fact? And why would you want to do this? Well, I want to do it because the less I'm affected, then the more I have equilibrium. But if I'm not affected, how do I know what's going on around me? It is completely normal to be affected. This is the vitality and the volatility of life, to be affected all the time. The problem, I would suggest, is not that we are affected. The problem is that we have some ideal concept that these religions and philosophies have begun in the first place. And this ideal concept is that we're looking for a state of equilibrium, that this is a sign of spiritual stability, of an enlightened person, of an intelligent person. And therefore we seek to be in that state, in that condition of being detached and unaffected. Also because when we're affected, we feel different feelings, we feel different sensations according to and depending on what's affecting us and what's going on around us. But that effect, why be frightened of that? It's just a change in the way you feel. So go with it. But what happens with Eastern philosophies in particular is there's a tremendous concern about becoming attached. And so living in this detachment, they're unable to really commit fully to living life in its full volatility, not understanding that the problem isn't the volatility. The problem isn't the fluctuations in how you're affected. The problem has nothing to do with the varying sensations in the body of you, which are your way to know your partner, your friend, your environment. It's nothing to do with that. The problem is entirely to do with how you mentally react to that. So the idealism of having to be somehow stable, according to the Eastern mentality of philosophy and religion, to be detached, to be precise. The problem with being detached is that to be detached, you are detached from yourself. You're detached from how you are affected. You're only detached from it. You are not affected. You're not unaffected. Because being affected is a biological organic thing. As a living being, the living organism that we are is always affected by the atmosphere of its environment. It's necessary to be affected. This is how we know what's going on. This is our first alert to danger. This is our first alert to being concerned over something. This is our first alert to everything, is how everything outside of us affects us. And that effect is a fluctuation in our feeling. Without any fluctuations in our feelings, we don't know anything. We don't know that something is dangerous. We don't know that something has changed. We don't read our environment, our friend, other people. We are desensitized in detachment, so we are insensitive. Insensitive in the body. But actually, this is a disassociation from the sensitivity of the body, not an insensitivity in the body itself, because the body is always affected. So again, the religion in general doesn't like the body. It wants us to be removed from the body in some sort of soul consciousness state, some sort of belief that the body is not important. And most importantly, that the body is not you. But why do you want to be relieved from the body? Because relief from the sensations of the body, you get that equilibrium again. And that's the ideal state. Then you're not affected by anything. But not being affected by anything, you can't understand anything. You render yourself ignorant. You render yourself completely without any direct, immediate sensory experience of life and of yourself. But the body is still being affected by all of that. So when we use these techniques and these ideologies to create this detachment, the detachment has to begin with detachment from my feelings, detachment how it feels to be me, detachment from the body of me, a certain level of detachment from the body of me, which really means all I'm doing is I'm rendering myself ignorant, sensorially ignorant to the effects that are actually hitting the body from the environment and the day-to-day life. I'm rendering myself temporarily ignorant to that, and in that sense, ignorant to my own self as a body, ignorant to what is actually going on in the body of me. And religion over thousands of years has been tremendously successful in rendering people disassociated from themselves as a body in pursuit of themselves as a mind, soul, or spirit, in some mental experience, some mentalized experience of life they call spirituality. And the more that we become more mental, the less we become physical, the number we become, the more disassociated and detached we become, the less we're able to actually know and feel our own presence and know and feel and understand ourselves through that presence and know how we are actually being affected and when we are affected. So we as a body are always affected. The problem isn't that we're affected. The problem is that religion and spirituality has given us an ideal that we shouldn't be. This has come down through into all sorts of ideologies, even outside of religion, that we shouldn't be affected. We should be cool and calm. Why? We are affected. We can't stop ourselves from being affected as a body because the body is a living thing. You can't control the body into not feeling anything. You can only control your experience of that through the way in which you think in reaction to yourself, in the way in which you apply techniques or ideals, or just thinking too much. You become gradually desensitized until you barely feel anything anymore. Problem with that, when you barely feel anything anymore, you barely understand anything anymore, and the first thing you don't understand anymore is how you're being affected by your world, your environment, and other people. And you don't understand how other people are being affected by you. So this disassociation into detachment causes you to become a dangerous person, in fact, because it's the detached person, the disassociated person, that can't feel anything, that doesn't therefore realize the effect that they're having on other people around them. You don't pick up that you've hurt someone, disturbed someone, and you don't pick up that they've hurt you or disturbed you. What's wrong with knowing you're hurt? You're hurt anyway, you might as well know about it. Using a mental technique to detach from that, or an ideal to detach into from that, any sort of variance on detachment from the body of you is a variant on detachment from your inherent understanding of yourself, your condition, what your needs are, and of the environmental needs and other people's needs. So how can this be good? How can this be a healthy thing? It's not a healthy thing. In fact, it's a type of psychosis. It's a really disturbing state that a person gets themselves into when they create a detachment out of their ideologies and their thinking and their meditation techniques, creating a detachment from firstly themselves without realizing it as a body into an idea of themselves and what they think about themselves. And that detachment, firstly, it's to ourselves, and secondly, once we're detached from ourselves to a varying degree or various degrees, to the same degree, we find ourselves being able to live quite detached from what's going on around us, and therefore not be unaffected, but feel unaffected. Why? And this is because they say this is the source of all suffering. Attachment is not the source of all suffering. Attachment is a completely natural state of every living organism. Without that attachment, you don't know what's going on around you. And the ideal of detachment is actually itself the cause of so much suffering in the world. I spent some time with a rather old couple recently running a 15-day meditation retreat, and they were both 75 years old, and they'd come from a Eastern philosophical background, 50 years of meditating and being involved in this philosophy or this religion. And so living together in the way they were, one partner, he was hurt. And so once he became hurt, he pulled away from any further experience of that hurt, which was connected with his partner. And his partner, feeling that rejection, used the philosophical concept, why do we need to be attached? We can live in a detached way because he's going to leave me or die one day or take sannyasin or become a monk one day anyway. This is a very common problem, particularly in the Eastern philosophies, where the man is married to the woman, for example, in the Hindu belief systems, where the woman is supposed to live for the sake of that man and her family, and the man is one day going to take sannyasa, meaning they'll go into a reclusion, into a monastic or monk lifestyle, and live alone for their spiritual enlightenment towards the end of their life. So the woman is living with this man, always expecting that one day he won't be there. One day he's going to leave me. And the problem with this, of course, is, and what happened with the woman's side of it, was to be detached was, okay, it's okay we're detached because one day he's going to go anyway, so why really get attached? In other words, why really get fully involved? But in further, why resolve the issues of disturbance that we already have in our life? Why be attached to that? And on the other side, whilst this man had the ideal that I'm not supposed to be attached because one day I am going to take sannyas and become a recluse so that I can reach my enlightenment state. And so this whole belief system creates such a disassociation in relationships. What was actually being justified there, we discovered, was that there was a hurt between them. And using the idea of being detached and not concerned about that enforced detachment because one or the other of them was avoiding feeling the hurt, then they never got to feel the hurt, never addressed the hurt, and never resolved the hurt, and lived in a secret state of detachment, a detachment that became more and more unpleasant, more and more unhappy, because as they grew older and spent time together, of course they're living together, or they were living together for all these years, but eventually it had to end. Not the living together, but the detachment. The detachment had to end. And the solution was, in fact, admitting the truth. And admitting the truth on her part was, I want to be with him and I want him to truly be with me. And admitting the truth on his part, I want her to be with me. I truly want to be with her, but I'm scared because I've been hurt. So what am I scared of? What is he scared of? He's just scared of a feeling now. And in healing that feeling on both sides and a lot of other things through this 15-day meditation retreat, during that time, they were able to come together and connect. And connect in the way that they honestly wanted to connect and needed to connect to feel whole. So there's no way that pain between the two of them can be resolved by one or the other disappearing into some detached monastic lifestyle. That's just an escape and a running away from a pain. And that is attachment. That attachment is, I'm caught up, I'm attached to my pain. Well, of course you are. And you're not going to resolve that pain by being detached from it. The only way to resolve that pain is to be admitting that you are attached to it. It is an attachment. It is an experience that you feel in your body. It's real. It's not some mental construct. It's really there. And so that attachment, when they came together in their pain, they came together in their unresolved pain, that pain dissolved very rapidly. And they've created a connection they hadn't had for 50 years, or probably never had before, because they'd never been free of their religious beliefs until they spent some time doing my app for a year or so, and then coming on a meditation retreat with me to really top it off. And since then, I've had a lot of contact with them, and they're absolutely, they're the happiest couple. At 75 years old, their whole relationship is just getting started again. So if you look at something like that, what's the interference there? The interference is the idealism of religion that says attachment is wrong. Attachment is not wrong. Attachment, how can it be wrong? It's the natural physicality of the body. It's not a mental choice. It's not a sin. It's not going to do you any harm. It's detachment that is harmful. Now, what is detachment? And how does detachment exist? Detachment exists as a mental construct. It is using your thinking to avoid, to deny, to stay away from, to numb out to suppress. And when you detach, then the natural resolution process of what it is, the pain or the distress that you're trying to detach from, that natural resolution process, whether it be like that last example of a couple coming together and getting in touch with how they really felt and resolving that at a feeling level, which is what they were doing on the 15-day meditation retreat. They were resolving all of that on a feeling level. Yeah, just in 2 weeks, all over. Really, that's how powerful feeling is. What was in the way of that happening for the previous 50 years was their stupid belief systems about being detached, their stupid ideals from their religion that has internally separated them from themselves into thinking about themselves in their life, and separated them from one another as the affected living organisms, beings that they actually are, into a mental construct of how they felt they should be, and trying to live out those ideals. These mental constructs are all detachment is. This prolongs attachment beyond its natural duration. So when you're being detached, you are unable to resolve attachment. Now, there's nothing wrong with attachment and therefore you should resolve it. I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying attachment, this connection that we have with one another and being affected by one another, this is how we know ourselves and one another on a day-by-day basis. And if we get hurt during that process, staying with that hurt and staying together in the processing of that hurt, understanding one another in that process of being connected, being attached, admitting that we're attached, admitting that both of us are affected when one person is hurt, and feeling that effect, That effect gradually heals the hurt. That effect, the presence of the effect and feeling that effect, gradually heals the hurt and heals the detachment. That is, the disassociation from one another that leads to a prolonging of the pain that has not been resolved, that can't be resolved so long as you're detached from it. So detachment prolongs misery, not attachment. Attachment is not the source of misery. Attachment is the source of all sorts of effects that we have from life, but it's also the source from which and within which we resolve those effects. And if we detach from those effects, we can't resolve them. So the detachment is moving from the real physical fact of me and how I'm affected by life into a mental construct of me, into a numbed out disassociation from me as I am, into some idealistic pursuit of enlightenment, which is total garbage. There's no such thing. The enlightenment is completely overlooked there. What is the enlightenment is to realize that I can live with being affected and I can get over those effects. And that all happens within the attachment, the natural attachment between you and me and every other creature, every other aspect of my world. I'm attached to everything in this world as a body. I'm attached to the oxygen in this world. I'll find out just how attached to oxygen I am when I can't breathe it in if it's not available. I'm physically attached to everything around me. Everything that affects me is something that I get attached to. There's nothing wrong with that. That is not the source of suffering. That's the source of life. That's the source of our needs being met. So attachment is not the source of suffering. Attachment enables us to be affected, and being affected and feeling that effect, which is still being attached to that which we've been affected by, and we stay with that effect and we feel that in our body, and if necessary, we interact with who's been affecting us or one another. For example, the example that I used about the older couple, and we work through that process, but working through that process is not a mental thing. You can't work through things mentally. That's just trying to fix things. You have to live through the process, not work through the process. You have to stay in the life of the process. And the process that's happening is completely natural. It's in the attachment that you feel to being hurt. And getting in touch with that hurt, you start to heal that hurt. And in the process of feeling your attachment to being hurt by someone, and processing that hurt as a feeling, so you don't have to do anything different to what's already happening naturally. You process that hurt, that disturbance as a feeling. Be honest with each other if you need to be, and if the other person won't be honest, you can still process your own hurt by being with that feeling. It is your attachment to that experience that is dissolving as you heal the effect of that experience. And how do you get to the point of dissolving your attachment to the effect of that experience is you have to stay in the attachment. You can't deny that you are attached to that. And in feeling that, being attached to it and feeling the hurt of that, knowing there's no way out. I know the Buddhists and the Hindus and the other Eastern philosophies in particular, they're always promising these ways out. They are so superficial in their understanding. They don't know what they're talking about. They don't understand how the body deals with things of this nature naturally. They don't understand the body because they spent thousands of years teaching themselves and other people to disassociate from the natural processes of the body, thinking that life is such a problem that we have to work it out mentally and apply all our arrogance and our ignorance and our mental constructs to what life's all about, and just end up making up a big story, a really big story about life, and in the process get completely detached from the effects of life that's happening already within the living organism. And then, because you're detached from the effects of life, you don't get to process the effects of life. In other words, you don't get to experience how you as a body automatically process any and all effects of life if you stay in the attachment to it, in the attachment of it. It is an attachment. You've been hurt. That's an extra. There's an attachment. You've got an attachment there. Healing that dissolves that attachment. So the attachment will be very, very extreme at the first point of really, really being hurt. And being with that, as in admitting to the truth of that, not trying to be detached from that, but just living with that as it is, and not fighting it, not mentally reacting to it. Then what happens is you stay in contact with it as it is, and you will experience the body taking care of it. Depending on the degree of the pain, so will determine how much time it takes for that to dissolve from your experience and the effect it's had, as the effect it's had on you. And as the effects are healed, so too the attachment is healed. And you're left without attachment to what you were previously attached to. So in the case of this couple, now that they've faced up to their pain and they've resolved the hurt, there is no longer attachment to each other. They're not attached. They're now able to enjoy one another's presence, to actually relate to one another very, very sensitively. And they will be more sensitive than ever now, because they're now reconnected with themselves, in themselves as a body, and with one another as living beings that feel, living beings that are highly sensitized, that are affected. And now with this sensitivity, by being affected by every way one affects the other person, when he affects her and he feels that, his sensitivity will bring his attention to that, and he will deal with that properly. Any way she affects him that hurts him, her sensitivity will pick up on that, and she will go back in there and deal with that. And so this is an education on life, hey? And not just some half-witted stupid concept of let's just be detached and everything's cool. This is not a healthy state at all. And it is half-witted, meaning that you're only getting half the picture there. And what is detachment? Detachment is a thought construct. Yeah? Detachment is a reaction to being affected by life. So being detached is being in a perpetual state of mental reaction to the realities of your life. I know in the practical sense, they will say, if you think too much about people, then you're going to be attached. And this type of attachment, this constant thinking about, say, somebody who's died, is actually harmful and the cause of suffering. Certainly that will cause suffering. But being detached is not the solution. It's being attached, again, in the body, rather than just complaining about the person's death and the loss of the person and the pain, the effect it's had on you. You have to come right back into the effect, back to the attachment, not be detached. Be attached because you are. Stop fighting it. Stop pretending. Be attached. Stop complaining about what you're attached to, meaning the effect, and just be affected. But be affected as a physical animal is affected. Be affected as a physical living body is affected. Be affected in the feelings of you, and that is the effect on you, inside of you, and feeling that effect. Not continually complaining about anything in life that's affected you, but coming back to, well, we all get affected. When things change, when people die, when people move on, we are affected. When people are living with us, we're affected. Those effects are so important. Those effects are a perpetual understanding of our relationship with the world and one another. And more importantly, in a way, it's our relationship with ourselves and all the different sensations that go on in our day-to-day lives. These we need a right relationship with, not to be frightened of them, not to be, oh, I've got to be detached from feeling that way, from being affected. I've got to be cool and unaffected. There is no such thing. You can't be unaffected. This is a disassociation from the fact and the reality that you are affected. You're still affected. Because if you're alive, you're feeling, you're sensing. If you're alive, you are perpetually affected. That is not the problem. I'll say it once again. This is what's been overlooked by these philosophies, is the effect is not the problem. It's your mental reaction to the effect. That's what causes the suffering. That's what prevents you from feeling the effect, and you get lost in the reactionary story about being affected, and you get stuck there. And in that story, you are suffering. when the answer to your suffering is in the reality of the effect. In fact, the answer to your suffering is in the reality of what you're complaining about and what you're in reaction to. And what are you in reaction to? You're in reaction to the felt effects of life, how they affected you. And those effects, getting back in touch with those effects, in there, you will find your resolution and the end of your suffering in the attachment, admitting the attachment to something that has not yet resolved itself. You don't resolve it. It will resolve itself if you do not detach from it. If you detach from it into the detachment and the detachment state of thinking and ideas and beliefs and meditations, then you will not heal a thing. You'll just numb out further from yourself. And this is exactly what religion and spirituality is all about. Disassociation and numbing out to the fact that you are, the fact that nobody wants to accept that you are just a living organism. And within this living organism, every effect is perpetually being resolved automatically. So everything that affects us is affecting us. We need to be affected to know what's going on and to remain affected for as long after the effect first happened, to remain affected for as long as it takes for being affected to bring about the resolution of that effect. And this will happen automatically. This has got nothing to do with thinking. This is entirely to do with feeling. Feeling in the body, feeling the sensations of the effects of life. So it's very, very important. Attachment and detachment are very poorly understood. So one is a bodily sensation and a bodily necessity and a bodily intelligence in which we hold all of our understanding as a felt sense, both of ourselves and the world around us. And all of our appropriate responses are held from in there as well. Whereas when we move into thinking about life, into detachment, then that detachment, because thinking is a detachment, it's once removed from the living experience of feeling and sensation into thoughts about those feelings and sensations. It's once removed from ourselves as a body into ideas about ourselves, into an idea self, a persona, a personality, an imagined soul, spirit, or mind that doesn't exist other than as a thought process. And what is a thought process? It's just an imagining. It's just images. It's just a construct that comes and goes. It's not life. It's dead. So, of course, you feel detached when you move into some thought construct, because the thought construct itself is not a living thing. It's a thought about life. It's a thought about the effects of life that you don't like. And you escape those effects and feeling those effects into your philosophical thoughts about life, your thoughts and ideals about life. And in that pursuit of achieving something greater, something grander, you are just running away from life, but also completely overlooking that life itself in the body is taking care of everything you're working so hard in thinking to resolve and miserably failing to do so. Absolutely failing to do so. Because you cannot resolve the effects of life disconnected from those effects in thinking about them. Once you're disconnected from those effects, this really affects the natural healing process of the organism processing life along the way. And so attachment and detachment have been very poorly understood. One, the attachment is the natural state of the body, and the other is the unnatural thought construct of our mentalization of life. And our mentalization of life is essentially a reaction to the felt sense of life. So one is alive and the other is about life, but not living itself. So because the body itself is alive and is life, it naturally protects its own existence. And to protect its own existence, it's necessary for that body to be in its own natural state of felt attachment, felt attachment to its environment and to its own existence. And in that, it takes care of itself. It cares for itself. And it only knows itself in that attached state. So the body knows life, knows itself only now, as life is existing, which is only now. It's not in the slightest bit interested in what happens later, after life, or in the future. That is of no consequence for the living organism. The living are never interested in death. They are only interested in and completely consumed in living. And when you're completely living, fully alive, you do not concern yourself with thought constructs about a future, about an afterlife. There is no afterlife from the perspective of the body. There is only life now. There is only life now. And so the body only knows life. And it knows life as an interrelated attachment, a state of attachment. There is no natural state of detachment. None at all. No state that the body goes into that is detachment. The body will pass out or become unconscious when it's hurt. But this is not the same as detaching, a choice of detaching from the effects of life. The body, the living organism of us, the life of us, is only interested in living. And that living can only be here right now. And that is the life of us every moment of every single day that we exist. Whereas thought itself is a dead thing. Thought is about life, is a contemplation about life. It is once removed from that which it thinks about. It's once removed from the living experience of life. So thought itself does not contain the fulfillment of life. It's only a description of life, and descriptions are empty. They're just words. So being caught in a continual movement of thinking is being caught in a continual movement of empty words. And the emptiness of words keeps us away from the quiet and the silent feeling of the existence of us as a body, where we actually feel the fulfillment and the fullness of life. And because thought doesn't have the fulfillment and the fullness of life, its concern is projected into a future. How will I live on? Because it's trying to live. Thought is trying to live, but it can't live. It doesn't really live. It's just about life. It's just words. It's just an activity of the body and a thinking about the body, or a thinking about life. So because it's once removed from life, in thinking about life, it's dead. It's empty. Its pursuit is more life. So hence, the empty person, the person caught up in philosophical ideals, is in search of a fulfillment of enlightenment, or a fulfillment in a future life. So they're concerned about, maybe next life my life will be a lived life. Maybe next life I'll be fulfilled. Because they're completely overlooking that is the interest of thinking. And the reason it's the interest of thinking, I would say, is because thinking is a dead thing in search of life. Thinking is an unreal thing in search of the real. But thinking, because it's once removed from the living, once removed from the real, once we are removed from the felt sense of our own existence, feeling that emptiness, we get stuck there in the pursuit of some fulfillment. And we're moving in that, our movement, in any thinking, in any pursuit, in any philosophy, in any religious belief system, we are moving further and further and further away from life, away from the body of us. So coming back to the body of you, drop beneath all of that thinking, whatever that thinking is, and you'll find in your own body, in the body of you, there is life. You are life. The body is a life of its own. It doesn't need a spirit or a soul to give it life. It is life. The body is life. It is the generator of life. It itself is a generating life form. It is life. And so as a body, back in touch with the effects of my life and everything in my life, and being attached to that, I can fully live it. And in the process of that, resolve each and every event that's affected me or disturbed me along the way. And that leaves me at the end of each resolution unattached. You cannot detach. You cannot decide to be unattached to something that's affected you. This is a mental approach to it. I'm going to be detached. I'm going to practice ways of looking at it that cause me to be detached. But the fact is, the feeling and the effect of it is still there. When someone dies, you can think about them reincarnating and be detached from the death. More, you're trying to be detached from your loss. But your loss is still there. So you can't mentally detach. You can only find the resolution of your attachment and involvement in your pain, in the pain itself, in the processing of the grief and the loss that you feel when somebody dies, for example. And always at the end of every one of these processes, which are going on all the time in the body, these processes of resolving the effects of life along the way just by remaining completely attached to them to whatever degree we are attached, but not going into mental stories about them, staying with the actual felt sense of attachment itself. So not complaining about the person dying, for example, or not dreaming that they're in reincarnation so you feel good about it. All that is on a mental and superficial level, and it doesn't go anywhere near the attachment or the event's effect on you. Coming back to the attachment, resolving that effect brings about, as the effect heals, and it does, so the attachment comes to its own end. So you can't decide to be detached. You can't decide to be unattached. You have to heal. You have to process through the attachments of everyday life. So you have to be attached. And that's the natural state of each and every living organism. Thanks for listening. And if you found this helpful, you can hit the subscribe button or the like button. But the other thing I would suggest, and I would really encourage you to do, is to download my Undo app. That app is a wealth of understanding on this level. It'll take you deeper into logical understanding, comprehensible, logical aha moments, many of them, all the way through that app, and bring you to a way of meditating which is entirely within the living life of you, the live body of you, rather than meditating in the dead concepts of meditation techniques. Thanks for joining me today. If this talk resonated with you or helped you in any way at all, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the talk with your friends so that they can get the benefit as well. Okay, bye for now.